Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for a job. I'm a hard worker. I set high goals.
We're first!
Will this be on television?
Morning news. If it bleeds, it leads.
Are you currently hiring?
You, get back!
Do you have a cell phone?
Yeah.
Does it have GPS?
Yeah.
Congratulations, you're hired. That I wouldn't do myself. You will be seeing me again.
Giuffanieri, I think you withheld information.
That would be a very unprofessional thing for me to do.
It would be murder.
I want something people can't turn away from.
911, what's your emergency?
We want all of this.
I think Lou is inspiring all of us to reach a little higher.
In the middle of the night in Los Angeles, Lewis breaks into a train yard and cuts off a chain-link fence. As a light approaches, he quickly hides his tools. A security guard arrives and asks for ID, but Lewis pretends to cooperate, only to attack the guard, knock him out, and steal his watch. Afterward, he heads to a scrap yard and haggles with the foreman over the fence. Once they settle on a price, Lewis pitches himself for a job, using corporate jargon to sell his skills. The foreman immediately refuses, so Lewis asks
How about an internship then?
I'm not hiring a fucking thief.
Later, while driving, Lewis notices several police cars speeding by and pulls over to check out the scene. He discovers a car accident with the vehicle in flames and people trapped inside. Joe and his employee arrive to record the incident, and Lewis watches with fascination. Afterward, Lewis approaches Joe, who explains that he's a stringer, someone who rushes to crime scenes or accidents to capture footage. He sells the footage to the newscast that offers the most money. A stringer only needs a camera and a police scanner. Intrigued by the job, Lewis asks if he's hiring, but Joe declines. The next day, Lewis watches the accident on TV and grows more determined to break into the business. He goes to the beach, waits for someone to get distracted, and steals a bike. He then pawns it, but the shop owner refuses to negotiate. Instead, Lewis asks for store credit and walks away with a camcorder and police scanner. That night, he listens to reports on the scanner, but quickly realizes he doesn't understand the codes and needs a good route to reach the scenes quickly. He first arrives at a simple arrest, but the cops immediately send him away. He then tries to film a woman stop for drunk driving, but the officers quickly shut him down. Eventually, he arrives at a fatal carjacking and gets close enough to record graphic footage of the victim. This angers a cop, who kicks him and another stringer out. The other stringer curses Lewis, frustrated that he couldn't finish recording. Lewis ignores his anger and follows him to hear his conversation on the phone so he can learn how to negotiate with newscasts and how much to charge. Afterward, Lewis goes to Channel 6 and shows the footage to news director Nina, who immediately becomes impressed by how close he got. She calls over the producer Frank, but the man freaks out, saying they can't put such graphic images on a morning show. Nina says they'll just add a warning and reminds him she's the boss, so she agrees to buy the footage. Lewis tries negotiating, but in the end, gets less money than he hoped. However, Nina tells him he has lots of potential and needs a better camera because his image quality right now isn't good, since she's willing to buy more from him in the future. Lewis asks what's best for ratings, and Nina explains their viewers are interested in graphic accidents and violent crimes in rich white areas. The next morning, Lewis sees his footage on TV and feels he's finally achieved something. He downloads the news clip on his computer and searches for a list of police codes online to memorize their meanings. Later, he meets with a young man called Rick for an interview. Once again, he uses a lot of corporate mumbo-jumbo to ask questions and make Rick talk about himself. But in the end, he hires him because he's got a phone, knows the area well, and knows how to use GPS. Lewis reveals
It's an internship.
I can't do that. I need money.
he needs to be paid at least a little something because he's almost homeless. After a long discussion, Lewis agrees to pay him $30 per night. In the evening, Lewis and Rick wait in the car while listening to the police scanner for an interesting incident, and Lewis uses the chance to teach Rick the police codes. After many hours of nothing, they finally hear about a fire, so they rush there. Rick is supposed to find the fastest route on the GPS and give directions, but Lewis drives like a maniac and yells at him because he's desperate to arrive first at the scene, getting very nervous. Rick accidentally gives him wrong directions, and by the time they make it to the right spot, it's too late because the paramedics have already wheeled the victim away. After Joe teases him for his tardiness, Lewis gets furious with Rick and demands better communication. So Rick asks him not to rush in the next time they get a good lead. Lewis doesn't yell at Rick, and they manage to arrive just in time. However, the police have closed up the robbed house, and there isn't anything interesting to record. Lewis refuses to give up and waits for the cops to be distracted. Then he sneaks inside the house to find the bullet holes in the kitchen. He rearranges the pictures on the fridge around the holes to make it look more tragic and ends the footage with the holes in the window that show the victims talking to the police. Before leaving, he steals some junk mail to get the names of the victims. Moments later, Lewis brings the footage to Nina, who loves it. Frank freaks out because it's clear that Lewis broke in and the names were stolen from private correspondence, but Nina decides to use it anyway. From then on, Lewis and Rick become very successful at finding good stories and recording them to later sell them to Nina. Rick finds the best routes for Lewis to get to the scene fast, and Lewis records every gritty detail without shame while avoiding the cops. He always watches TV to see his own work on the screen and downloads all the clips to create a collection on his computer. When he gets enough money, he gets a better camera for himself and a second one for Rick so he can record from a different angle. One night, they make it to a car crash before the police. Lewis tries to interview one of the drivers, who curses him because he's desperately trying to talk to the 911 operator. Next, Lewis checks the destroyed cars and finds the other driver dead in a dark area. So he starts dragging the body until it's in front of the car lights for a better shot. He records as much as he can until the cops arrive and send him away. Joe sees him walk by and realizes he's lost this one. Later, when Lewis brings the footage to Nina, she notices he has blood on his sleeve, but he ignores it.
Do you want to go with me? I think we could have fun together.
At first, Nina turns him down, saying she doesn't want to compromise their professional relationship. However,
What if by saying no you
so she has no choice but to accept. The next day, Joe bumps into Lewis and explains he'll make his team bigger with various vans working for him. So he wants Lewis to join him. Lewis turns him down, and when Joe keeps on insisting, Lewis threatens him with violence. A furious Joe leaves as he curses Lewis's name. When Saturday comes, Lewis has dinner with Nina at a restaurant and admits he wants her to be his lover. Once again, Nina turns him down, saying this was just professional courtesy. Lewis immediately starts citing lots of data he's found on his research, pointing out her station is the lowest rated, and it's been his videos that brought thousands of new viewers. He knows Nina's contract will end soon, so if she wants it to be renewed and keep her job, she must take his offer. A reluctant Nina has no choice but to start meeting Lewis on the weekends to get naughty together in exchange for him selling the videos to only her. Sometime later, Rick makes another route mistake and Lewis fails to arrive in time for the biggest incident of the evening. Joe and his team get all the footage first, and Joe makes fun of Lewis for it. At the end of the night, Lewis brings Nina some recordings of smaller crimes, and Nina snaps because their rival channel will get the big story instead. Her bosses will be furious, and she feels like she's giving him her body for nothing. The next morning, Lewis watches Joe's footage on the rival channel and gets so angry that he smashes his bathroom mirror. Wanting revenge, he decides to sneak into Joe's house and mess with his van. That night, Lewis and Rick arrived just in time to record a car crash. It turns out it's Joe's van, and he was seriously hurt in the accident, so he's being taken away by the ambulance. Rick thinks it's wrong to record a fellow stringer and says Joe is one of them. But Lewis doesn't care and comes closer to film everything anyway. Joe glares at Lewis with fury as he chokes on his own blood. A few nights later, Lewis and Rick are fast enough to show up at a large mansion that was broken into before the cops arrive. Lewis sneaks inside and sees the criminals fleeing the scene, so he hides in the bushes to film their faces and their van's license plate. Then Lewis goes inside the house and records every drop of blood on the floor, following the trail to find all the victims' bodies one by one. Lewis makes sure to film them all, and even adds footage of an empty crib with enough build-up to make the viewer think there may be a dead baby in it. When he finds the last body, he realizes the man is still alive, but instead of helping him, he records him too, before running away with Rick right before the police arrive. They stop the car just after a few blocks so Lewis can quickly cut the criminals and the living victim out of the footage. Moments later, he takes the video to Nina, who is incredibly impressed. As usual, Frank freaks out, so Nina calls the channel's lawyer to make sure this is legal. The lawyer explains they're blurring the lines, but as long as they don't reveal the address and censor the victims' faces, they should be good. Afterward, Lewis asks $15,000 for the footage, and when Nina refuses to give him that much, he finally snaps. He points out he has all the power here, so from now on she must always pay whatever he asks for without complaining, make the anchors give credit to his company Video Production News, and introduce Lewis to all her co-workers, so he can start making connections. Terrified, Nina can only agree. When it's finally time to go live, Lewis stays and watches with satisfaction how the anchors mention his company while presenting the footage. The anchors also have to describe the scene of the crime, and Nina keeps giving them cues to make it all more dramatic, graphic, and fear-mongering. When they cut for a commercial break, Nina's bosses called to congratulate her and asked to meet Lewis. The next morning, Detective Frontieri and her partner come to Lewis's apartment to ask him some questions. Lewis makes up a story, saying he heard the shots and entered the house.
I wanted to see if I could help.
But it was too late, so he started recording instead. He remembers seeing a van going away, but he didn't catch the criminals' faces. The detectives aren't convinced, but they can't do more, so they leave. Afterward, Lewis searches for the license plate online and gets the address of one of the criminals. He goes there with Rick, and they wait outside the house for the criminal to come out. When Rick notices the van, he wonders why Lewis won't call the cops now. So Lewis explains he wants the criminals to go somewhere nicer, hoping that they'll resist the arrest and make a better story. Rick freaks out and says this is getting too dangerous, so he demands a raise. Lewis makes him choose the number, and Rick says $75 a night, causing Lewis to immediately seal the deal. His reaction makes Rick realize he could have asked for much more, but when he tries to ask for a better number, Lewis tells him it's too late. When the criminal finally leaves the house, the duo follows him and watches him pick up his partner. Then they continue to follow them until the criminals stop at a fast food restaurant. Lewis finally calls the cops, giving them detailed descriptions and saying the criminals are armed. He even clarifies these are the wanted guys from the infamous crime and offers his name as the person who found them. After Lewis hangs up, Rick realizes he'll ask for the reward the police put on these guys and asks for half of it. Lewis gets furious, but he needs a second camera for those extra angles, so he agrees to pay and Rick goes to stand on the other side of the restaurant. Soon the cops arrive, and when they approach the criminals, the guys open fire, casing a gunfight that kills several men. Lewis and Rick film everything as one of the criminals is killed too, and the other is wounded, but he can still run and get in his van to escape. The cops immediately chase after him, and Lewis picks up Rick before following them as well. While Lewis drives like a maniac, he keeps yelling at Rick, so he won't stop recording. The car chase is so crazy that a civilian car crashes against a police vehicle, taking it out of the game. The other police car continues to follow the criminal who starts ramming their car with his van until it causes an accident that makes both him and the cops crash. Lewis immediately rushes to get a shot of all the bodies and suddenly announces the criminal.
He's dead.
He asks Rick to come and record so he can learn more about the gruesome shots. But when Rick comes closer, the criminal turns out. Lewis doesn't look surprised and continues to record as the criminal comes out of the car. But before he can hurt Lewis, he hears the police arrive and tries to run away. However, the cops immediately shoot him down too. Then, Lewis checks on Rick and records his injuries, making Rick realize that Lewis had known the criminal was alive and used Rick to get a better story. Lewis shows no remorse and takes Rick's camera after he dies. Afterward, Lewis brings all the footage to Nina, who is delighted by all the gruesome imagery. When they're about to go live, Frank informs her that a secret but trustworthy source has told him the crime that the house hadn't been random thugs getting violent. The family had been part of the mob, and they were hiding illegal substances. However, Nina refuses to add the detail to the story, saying the tragedy of the common man sells more. Frank tells her she sounds like Lewis, but Nina takes it as a compliment, saying that Lewis has inspired them to reach higher. Later, Detective Frontier comes to the station and demands to have the footage as it is evidence. but Nina refuses to surrender the tapes without a warrant. Then Frontier takes Lewis to the station to interrogate him, but he stays calm and sticks to his story. Frontier gets angrier by the second and calls him out for his crazy and immoral work policies. Yet she has to release him because she has no evidence. A few nights later, Lewis gets 2 vans with a Video Production News logo and hires 3 interns. He won't be paying any of them, but he promises that he won't make them do anything he won't do himself before they leave together to find the next story. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and press the bell icon for more amazing videos. See you next time.